Welcome to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Devotions designed to inspire you on your daily walk with God. Here's your host, Ken Gurley.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good Wednesday morning to each and every one of you. Happy to be a part of this morning devotion family. Tessie's back with us today. Say hello, Tessie. She was driving, she was listening, but she was not posting and driving. Yesterday, she was a lurker, but today, Tessie's converted. She is converted. She's back on here. Say hello to everybody. Tessie, let them know you're still alive. What a great, I'm in trouble. What a great morning. There she is. Okay. What a great morning for each and all of us, Morning Devotion family. It's Wednesday, December 7th. Stop, we pause, and we remember a fateful day, a day that will live in infamy in our nation's history. And we pay tribute and honor to all who were there at Pearl Harbor, all who were affected by it. For that generation, the greatest generation, the builder generation, and for all the generations to come, we owe you so very, very much. We say blessings to each one of you. We pray that this is the greatest Wednesday of your life. You may as well treat it as such. You have no hope for tomorrow, and yesterday is gone, so this is the day the Lord has made. We'll rejoice and be glad in it. For those of you that are new to the Morning Devotion family, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on Facebook, follow. But more important than just being a spectator, come on in, be a participator. Even if you watch this later during the day, encourage someone, identify with someone's need as you see it fly by. Encourage, bless someone, and let's be a family getting through the year of 2022 together. Yeah, we're almost there, 3 weeks away or so to the end of the year, and I pray the blessings of the Lord upon you. Today, what a great subject, Shammah's Epitaph. He stopped, he stood. Now, you know, an epitaph is what we would normally say. It's a short saying that is supposed to summarize a person's life, what they value. Quite often it's found on a memorial marker in a cemetery, a tombstone, a grave marker. But Shammah's epitaph would have to be, he stopped, he stood. It was yesterday when I mentioned the amygdala, a word that you normally don't use in the morning. When I talked about that portion of the human brain that is thought to be responsible for fight or flight, there was just a flood of thoughts that hit me. And I largely was successful yesterday in fending them off, but one just would not go away. And Shammah wanted his due today, and I'm going to give him his due. And let's just let it happen. Shammah's epitaph, he stopped and he stood. So welcome AJ, welcome Lillian, welcome to each and all of you. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for sharing in this great day and seeing some good things happen. So Catherine, Roy, let's buckle up and let's look at Shammah's epitaph. He stopped, he stood. Okay, here's what it is. The amygdala, that portion of the brain, is responsible for three actions or reactions on our part. It's the fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the usual responses we have to something that shocks us, something that, I don't know, it just gets a hold of us. Yeah, that's what happens. Fight, flight, or freeze. They're self-explanatory. When triggered by an external threat, humanity, I don't know, we stand, we fight, we run away, we freeze. Yes. Adam and Eve, I mean, look at their response to the serpent in the garden. They froze, didn't put up a fight. They didn't run away. It wasn't fight or flight with them. It was freeze. We've got the same sort of reaction. If we're inundated with data, we don't know what to do. It's called analysis paralysis. Yes, you will find that in the Bible. But you'll find people that are just overwhelmed. They don't know what to do, and so they do nothing. They've looked at this option, they've considered that option, they don't know which way to go, so they just freeze. Solomon observed the same in the people of his day. In Ecclesiastes 11, he said, if you observe the wind, you're not going to sow, and if you regard the clouds, you're never going to reap. You're in a frozen state. You ought to let it go. Now, where did that come from? Oh, my. Some people just freeze, just TMI, too much information, rather than make a mistake. Have you ever been there? You just don't want to make a mistake, so you just choose to do nothing. But don't you know that sometimes doing nothing is, it's just about the worst choice of all. Fight, flight, or freeze. Some freeze. Some just run away. They run away. That is their chosen option to any external stimulus. They're a rolling stone. They're always on the road. Let the heat get a little too hot and they're out of the kitchen. Yes, the prodigal ran away. Hagar in the Bible, she ran away. I mean, look at that mighty army that Gideon had. You remember the story of Gideon, one of the judges of Israel. The Midianites had come out to fight with an army of 130,000. That's pretty good. That's a lot of firepower. But God led this young man, Gideon, to become a judge of Israel. First, he had to overcome his own fears, and isn't that always the case? You remember the first time we see Gideon in the Bible, he's hiding behind a wine press for fear of the enemy. But God uses this man to raise an army of 32,000. That's pretty good. He goes from being frozen to being chosen and out on the battlefield. He's raised an army of 32,000. Now, it's still less than a fourth of the size of the Midianite army. Each Israelite's going to have to slay 4 Midianites. But God said that's just too many. That's just too many people. I'm not going to get any glory. Even if it's just 1 to 4 odds, I'm not going to get enough glory out of this situation. So do you remember what happened? Those who were afraid left, and you went down from 32,000 to 10,000. And then those who were not perceptive and aware of what was going on, and you went down from 10,000 to 300? What happened to the army of 32,000? We're down to 300. What happened to the 31,700? Well, it was that paralysis caused by fear. They turned back. They exercised the fright and the flight mode. Yes, that would work better, wouldn't it? Fight, flight, and fright. Yeah, that would work better. And so they turned away. They ran away. From 32,000 to 300. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. Hey, Brother Moore, Stephen, just think about this just a second. Only 1 in 100 refused to flee. Only 1 in 100 stood their ground. I don't know what the odds are between the fight and the flight and the fright, those 3 options. But here we see that only 1 in 100 chose to fight. And it's those mighty 300 that God's glory rained down upon the Midianites. We're talking about Shammah's Epitaph. Now, if you've noticed, I've not yet got to the story of Shammah, but I am almost there. If you're just joining us, don't be a lurker. Jump into the conversation like Catherine and Kurt and Debbie and Mike are right now. Just get out there. You may be from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Don't be embarrassed of your background. I know nothing about Scranton. I just picked that out of random. So if you're from Scranton, don't be offended. But do not be a lurker. Get out there, identify yourself, encourage one another. This is few, 1 in 100 of Gideon's army stood. And in that mantra of fight, flight, and fright, rare is the person who will stand their ground. That's why Shammah is so important. Shammah, one of David's mighty men. I like the sound of Shammah. I mean, it's a fun word to say. After all, we also use it in the compound name of Jehovah Shammah, the God who is there. But when you dig into the meaning of the name Shammah, it's a little more complex than there. It actually means desolation, astonishment, waste, horror, devastation, emptiness. This man named Shammah, who was one of David's mighty men, was apparently named after some devastating event in his family's life. Just as the dying Rachel named her second-born son Benoni, meaning the son of my sorrow. Jacob renamed him Benjamin, the son of my power. Sometimes we mark our circumstances. And Shammah bore the mark of devastation, born in a difficult time, in some horrible low point of his family's existence. That's Shammah. Not a name to be proud of, not a name to just walk around and say, my name is devastation, my name is waste, my name is horror. No. It's a name that took a lot to digest. It's a name that Shammah bore, and apparently bore it well. Sort of like Johnny Cash's, you'll find this in the old hymnal, that Johnny Cash is a boy named Sue. I mean, it took some courage to wear that name, Shammah. Hello, my name is devastation. My name is desolation. What a name. What a name. And just maybe, that's a little bit of the story behind Shammah. He knew how to stand his ground. He'd done it all of his life. He's used to standing up to the bullies. Wasn't born in good times, was born in bad times. He was marked by those bad times. He knew that life gets gritty and life gets rough, and sometimes you got to stand. You have to stand and withstand, and sometimes fright and flight are no options at all. You got to stand and fight. This is one of David's mighty men. His name is Shammah. His name is desolation. His name is devastation. I want to introduce this man to you. You know those mighty men of David, they came to David when he was on the run. The Bible says they were distressed, they were discouraged, they were in debt. Yeah, and they came and were transformed into mighty men. Because when you get around the right leader and the right cause, there is a transformation that will take place. And Shammah was a part of that transformation. Together they would form a new nation, a fresh chance for God to start over with his people. I guess we would call them a militia today. They were unusually gifted. David, the giant killer, attracted future giant killers, a special forces group, I guess you could say, the Green Berets, the SEAL team, the Delta Force of Judah. They were loyal, they were devoted, they were sacrificial. And boy, could they fight. Oh, they fought. They knew how to fight. They're found throughout the story of David in 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, but it's in 2 Samuel 23. Their stories just take over. You read of Adino, who squared off against 800, or Abishai, David's nephew, one of the sons of Zeruiah, who lifted up his spear against 300. Then one of my personal favorites is Benai. I'm telling you, what an incredible person, what a trusted person in transitional times. Read the story of Benai. It's just, he's such an intriguing character. I guess he's most known by people today. It was him who slew a lion in a pit on a snowy day. Yeah, you get the picture. This was the toughest of the tough. And then along comes Shammah, the son of Agi, a Harahite. Let me just put it in our vernacular. What does a Harahite mean? It basically means Shammah was a mountaineer. Shammah was a hillbilly. Yeah, he was rough. He was tough, raised in rough circumstances, raised in perhaps a backwards environment, accustomed to deprivation, accustomed to hardship. And so this pivotal day in Shammah's life, when he sees a field of lentils, a pea patch, being attacked by the enemy, maybe where he was from, to have a field like that meant the difference between life and death. Maybe in his way of understanding, he knew the value of that field to those poor farmers. There came a day in 2 Samuel 23, the age-old nemesis of Israel attacked. A horde of Philistines had done what the enemies always had done. They were foraging for food, and they spy this field of lentils and these workers out there harvesting the lentils. Sensing lunch at hand, they attack the people out in the fields. Thought they'd just run them off. Just a bunch of farm workers. But what they didn't know, in the midst of those farm workers stood a Shammah. And Shammah was faced with that age-old issue. Fight, flight, fright. What do I do? What do I do? As hundreds of enemy soldiers, swords and spears drawn, blood-curdling screams empty into that field of laborers, harvesting their poor crop of peas. Fear and chaos seemed the order of the day, and disorder resulted. These people were farmers. Maybe they had a sickle in their hand, maybe a hoe, maybe a shovel. They had zero chance against these armed invaders. To stand for the farmer meant certain death. To those women and children out in the field, to flee means that they may be hungry in the future, but at least they had a chance of surviving. They drop anything they can drop, their farming utensils, and run for all they're worth, except for one, Shammah. Maybe he took a step or two with the crowd, but soon that backbone like steel, that forehead like flint, it showed up. Grit took over. Resolution took over. The Bible says that Shammah took his stand in the midst of a field of lentils. He fought for those peas like he was fighting for his family and his future. I've seen such bravery in people in my life. I've seen men and women fight for marriages when all hope seems gone. I've watched parents fight for their children when everyone else had given up on them. I've seen individuals who had to stand in classrooms, courtrooms, conference rooms, in the public square, and speak their convictions against withering criticism. I mean, this week, case was argued in the Supreme Court, a web designer who stood up for her conviction. She's been castigated, ridiculed, the weight of the law and law enforcement thrown against her, but still, she stood. You just say, oh, it's just a website. Well, it's her field of lentils. And she decided, I'm going to take a stand. It makes you realize how uncommon common bravery really is. The courage to get up in the morning in spite of insurmountable odds. To go fight for the right and speak truth and love, to fend off despair and criticism, to stand for what matters in this life and for all eternity. Many would have looked at Shammah and said, oh, my, what are you doing, son? It's political suicide. Why don't you just go along to get along? Go along with the flow, blend in. Don't stand up, don't stand out. And had he done so, his story would not be found in the Bible. But really, Don't you see that Shammah couldn't do that? Others had the option of flight and fright, but not Shammah. Others running away were just farmers. They weren't trained in the art of warfare. They could be excused for fleeing, but not Shammah. Shammah couldn't run. His training wouldn't let him. It was before the pandemic. My family and I, we were on vacation, summer vacation. What a great vacation it was. Always a great vacation when you're with your family, no matter where you are. And we had our family with us, and we were in British Columbia, just a beautiful part of Canada. And we'd gone to the wharfs there in Vancouver to eat some seafood. And we were just walking along the wharf, found a place to stop and sit down and eat, and weren't really paying too much attention. The crowds were moving by. And we did notice earlier, though, that the wharfs where we were at were unprotected. There were no railings. And it was a pretty steep drop-off down to the rocks, the water, and the piers below. And so we were mindful and steered clear of the edge with our grandchildren, But as we were eating, we looked up and we noticed, and we just saw it as it happened, that a woman was walking with her small son, and her son just ran on ahead of her and just leapt almost over the edge of the wharf to the rocks and water and piers below. All of us sat there frozen. It's like, oh, you could hear the crowd gasp over what they had just seen. But at the same time as we were reacting with a gasp, there was a young man, fit, moving, it seemed, at the speed of light. He leapt up from a nearby table, raced across the wharf, didn't even hesitate when he got to the edge. He dropped over the side. I saw one hand brace himself on the edge of the wharf. We all jump up, we run over to the wharf, and by the time we get there, that young man, probably 30 years of age, had already dropped to the rocks below, raced to the water, dove into the water, pulled the child out of the water, and was handing the child back up. Yeah, we found out later he was Special Forces. We found out later that when most of humanity would run from danger, they're trained to run toward it. That was Shammah. He didn't run from danger. His epitaph, his inscribed legacy on the tombstone of his life, on the pages, this living epistle whose story is found there in 2 Samuel. He stopped. He stopped in the middle of that pea patch, and he stood. You say, I just see a field of lentils. Not Shammah. He saw the lives of men and women who depended on that produce. He saw that his efforts that day could at least purchase some time for others to find safety. Maybe he could slow down the advance of the enemy. You say it's just a patch of peas, but he saw a line like Colonel Travis at the Alamo. He saw a line that you had to decide on which side of the line you would step over. So Shammah saw a line. He saw a line that he wouldn't and he couldn't cross over. Others just saw a lentil field. But Hope, Constance, April, Shammah saw the future. He saw that this could be a stronghold of the enemy, a stranglehold on Israel. That if the Philistines took this land, then the next village may fall. And eventually the hope of Israel would be extinguished. And Shammah, in the middle of the field, the Bible says, he stopped and he made his stand. Call it what you will. Some would call it foolishness. I call it courage, to stand when others flee. Some would call it nonsensical. I call it character, to be willing to stand up when others refuse. Some call it political side. Why don't you call it integrity, to have the root of character to resist the majority opinion? Or maybe it's just faith. The ability to say things are looking bad, but even here I'm going to stand because I see something that God is going to turn for good. I recognize we always don't get our way, and compromise is not always a dirty word, that seeking the common good eclipses our personal agendas and wishes. And yes, I know that. But sometimes you and I can't dialogue and negotiate. We can't work out win-win solutions when the enemy attacks. You can't wave a white flag. I like what Job said, till I die, I will not remove mine integrity from me. Mine righteousness I hold fast. I'll not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me as long as I live. Shammah could have run and people would have never known, but Shammah in his heart would have known. And it would have reproached him, saying, you could have done something. The courage, the grit, the resilience. Shammah didn't look around and say, am I in the majority? No, I'll stand even if I stand alone. He didn't look around and say, well, I'll come back and fight when I've got Adino and Eleazar and Abishai by my side. No, he stood alone. Like David waded into that valley of Elah alone against a giant, so Shammah stands alone. And he waits for the enemy to attack. You know what happens, don't you? That the enemy can't stand it when someone stands up with him. Like Haman. He looked over the crowd that was bowing toward him, but he saw old Mordecai, that fly in the ointment, who would not bow. Those Philistines that day, their attention drifted away from the lentils and drifted away from the people fleeing, and they saw one man bucking the tide. They saw one person standing up. And the enemy turned the ferocity against the person who had the tenacity and the faith to take a stand. You see, for Shammah, there were only two options. Either we win or we die. And what happened? You know what happened. Let me put it as the Bible said it. The Lord wrought a great victory that day. And therein you find the hidden force behind Shammah and any person of faith, that if you will stand for truth and decency and for the underprivileged, and stand for compassion and mercy and holiness and righteousness and justice, if you will withstand criticism and persecution and the fiery onslaught of the carnal and unconcerned, God shows up. Yes, he does. He shows up. That is Shammah's epitaph. He stopped. He stood. Yes. It may look like you're in a field of lentils battling all alone, but why don't you just stop and say, God, here I'm going to stand. I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding, and I'm not cowering in fear. I'm going to take a stand. This is the day. This is the day. Kyra, Wendy, this is the day. This is the day, Don. This is the day, Keenan. This is the day to take a stand. And may it be an everlasting tribute to you and your testimony, that in the time of your testing, you stopped, you stood. God bless you. My prayers are with you. Share this with others. Look forward to seeing you again. Mañana. Go have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you for listening to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Join us next time for another inspiring devotion. To support this ministry, please visit firstchurch.com/give.